And so what I love about this community here at Mission Ebenezer, especially with teaching the new members class, is that we are a feisty bunch of people. Like, I hear your stories, I hear your testimonies, and I'm like, man, you're tough. I want you on my team. If I'm getting in a fight, I want you on my side. Like, this is a church that is just like, man, we are a special group of people. We're gritty in our faith, and I love it. And when I was thinking about today's story, we're going to be coming from Genesis chapter 32. We're still in the book of Genesis. But I thought about this phrase of, have you ever had a fight or ever was upset with someone and you actually forgot why? You know, as the years go by, you start to forget the details. You start to forget who started it, who was right and who was wrong. We've told our side or our version of the story so much that we actually forget the truth. Sometimes there's a break in communication because we actually don't see each other. Last week we talked about communication and the best ways that as Christians we can communicate, but sometimes there's a break in communication because we simply have just cut each other off. And you start to think about the situation, like you've been able to put it back and stuff it and not think about it so long, and that's how you've forgotten the details, but then you start to think about it when you know that you're going to see them again. So whether that be a holiday when the family is getting together, or whether that be a graduation or a funeral, depending on where you are, you start to worry about, will they even talk to me when I see them? Will they call me out? Will we have this big blow up at this graduation or funeral? Will we embarrass our family? And will they forgive me, or even will I just humble myself and forgive them? Leading up to the event, your mind is so consumed that you're not even thinking about the graduation, the person that's graduating, or you're not thinking about the person you're memorializing, but you're thinking about this person who's wronged you. You're thinking about the conversations that you're going to have. I know in my mind, in the scenario that I'm thinking of, I was consumed with what will my response be? If they say this, ooh, I have this come back. Like I'm going through my text messages and I'm screenshotting and I'm going to have my receipts, right? Like I'm thinking about what it is I'm going to have to defend myself and defend my side of the story. And I'm not even worried about the actual event that's bringing us together. I rehearse my side of the story, and sometimes I forget even the details, and I even forget why I was actually upset with them. So what if 20 years have passed, and you're actually fighting with your brother, and the last time you've seen each other, your life was threatened? So 20 years have passed, you've forgotten all the details, and you left this relationship on the note where your life is actually being threatened. And Jacob, in chapter 32 of Genesis, finds himself in this very predicament. The last time he saw his brother Esau, he had traded a bowl of soup for Esau's birthright. Esau believes that Jacob had swindled him twice. First for the birthright, for a bowl of soup, and secondly for his blessing. That's Esau's side of the story. You've swindled me twice. But Jacob's side of the story is, it was a fair deal. I offered you soup, you gave me your birthright. You didn't value your birthright in the first place. And so on Jacob's side, hey, it was a fair deal. On Esau's side, you swindled me twice. They view the situation differently. After 20 years, they have forgotten the details. And so this morning's message, I would like to entitle it, The Fight to Remember. In Genesis chapter 32, so to open your Bibles because we're going to be in 32 for a little bit. Genesis chapter 32, starting at verse 9. The scripture says, Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the county of Edom. He instructed them, this is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have been remained there till now. I have cattle, donkeys, sheep, goats, males and female servants. Now I'm sending this message to my Lord that I may find favor in your eyes." When the messenger returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you with 400 men are with him." In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the other on the left may escape. Then Jacob prayed, "O God, my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you have said to me, go back to your country and the country of your relatives, and I will make you prosper." So we see this scenario where Jacob is entering back or on the road back to his homeland. And he knows that he's going to encounter Esau, and so he sends a group of men before him. And he realizes that Esau is actually going to meet him halfway with 400 men. And so Jacob is fearful of this encounter. 20 years has passed, and Jacob is certain that Esau wants revenge. Think about this. You leave, the last time you see your brother 20 years ago is that your life is threatened, so you're fleeing for your life. And so now he hears that his brother is not only meeting him halfway, but he's meeting him with 400 men. So Jacob thinks about his family and the 20 years of life of growth and development. Esau had no clue. He had no clue about his nieces and nephews or his sister-in-laws. And Jacob at this time had a lot to lose. So when Jacob fled Esau, he fled to his mother's brother's home. So I know sometimes in the New Testament, or excuse me, in the Old Testament, in Genesis particularly, sometimes we forget these like family trees. And so I want us to be able to focus on the names and be able to keep it together, right? And so Jacob and Esau's mother was Rebekah. And Rebekah, because Jacob was her favorite, says, "Look, flee, because I don't want to lose both my sons today. Flee and go to my brother's home." And on the way there, Jacob has this dream. So he lays his head on this rock and he has this dream. And he sees this stairwell all the way up to heaven. And in the dream, the Lord says this to him. And you find this in Genesis 28, verses 18 and 15. It says, "There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised." And so Jacob, he's had this dream. He's resting on his way to his uncle's house, and he calls this place Bethel. And he makes a vow to the Lord. And the vow that Jacob makes to the Lord is this: "If you allow me to return back to my mother's land safely, you will be my God." And so keep this in mind. He's on his way to his uncle's house. And on the way there, he takes a break and he goes to sleep, and he has this dream of this stairway to heaven. And he has this encounter with the Lord that says, "I will be with you. I will never leave you until I have done what I have promised." And so Jacob continues on this journey to his uncle Laban's house. And he stops at this well, and he doesn't even know this, but he's about to meet the love of his life. And then he realizes that is actually Laban's daughter, Rachel. And so when Jacob's mom is telling him, "Go flee," he's also saying, "Look, go to your uncle's house and also take a wife of his household." And so he's not knowing that the person that he's meeting at this well, he's fallen in love for someone in the family that his mother has requested that he actually take a wife of. And so he meets Laban and he makes this deal with him. And the deal is that I will work for 7 years to marry Rachel. Unfortunately, when 7 years happened and he thinks he's going to get his bride, he gets Rachel's sister, Leah. And so he has a bride. It's not who he thinks it of. And it says it's because it's outside of the custom to give the younger daughter first when the oldest daughter hasn't even been married yet. Even though they made a deal. But it says it's outside of the custom. And so Laban makes another dishonest deal. But he says, look, if you want Rachel, you have to work another 7 years. And so Jacob works 14 years under Laban, and he works his land, and he grows his crop and his livestock. And he has 2 wives now, Leah and Rachel. But the thing is about the relationship with Rachel and Leah is that Leah was able to conceive. She conceived 4 sons, but Rachel at the time was barren and was unable to conceive. And so can you think about the dysfunction and the tension happening within this marriage? The love of your life is unable to conceive. And even though Leah is able to have children, Leah is also being treated poorly by Jacob and Rachel. And so Rachel, she's in despair because she's unable to have children. And so she follows in the footsteps of Jacob's grandmother, Sarah, and offers her servant to have children. And they have 2 sons. Leah, again, she's jealous because Leah knows that Rachel is Jacob's true love. And so Leah jumps in and she offers her servants. And they have 1 more son. And then at the time, Leah is still frustrated. She's like, Lord, I'm unable to have any more children. Maybe if I have another child, that Jacob will find favor with me. And so she's able to have another son and another daughter. Later on in the story, Rachel is able to conceive her son Joseph. So over a course of 20 years, and I pray that you're sticking with the story, over a course of 20 years, Jacob builds a family and a legacy. Esau doesn't know Rachel and Leah, and he doesn't know Jacob's daughters Dinah. And he doesn't know his 11 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and later Joseph. Think about our relationships when there's a disconnect and how the person who you've been feuding with, they don't know the development and the growth that's been happening in your life. They don't know that you've received Jesus. They don't know your children. They don't know all of the things that has been going on in your life. And so Jacob is recognizing and he's reminiscing. He's like, man, I have a lot to lose because Esau doesn't know how I've changed. He doesn't know this vow that I've made with the Lord. He doesn't know my family. And so he is living in this tension because he remembers, I've made this vow to the Lord at Bethel, but he's also living in the tension that he's fearful. He's fearful of what he's fearful of what Esau will do when they have this encounter after 20 years. And so when Jacob is unsure, he begins to pray. And what's funny about this is I'm not even sure if Jacob knows that he's praying, but he falls on his knees and his face and he's fearful. So he goes to the Lord to remind the Lord of the promises that the Lord has made to him. And so in chapter 32, verses 10 and 12, it says, Jacob is saying this to the Lord. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become 2 camps. Save me, I pray, from the hands of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and you will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. And so Jacob, he's considering this promise that the Lord had made to him. He's crying out, Lord, save me from the hand of my brother. You've promised me that you're going to allow my family to grow beyond, like, you can't even count the number. He's recalling the promise of Abraham. He's recalling that every nation and family will be blessed through my family. And he says, Lord, I don't want to die. I'm fearful. Work on my behalf. And so in his own mind, Jacob is trying to fix the situation. So he comes up with this plan and he sends men ahead of him to meet and greet Esau with a gift. So think about it. You're thinking about, okay, how can I soften the situation before it actually happens. So you're thinking, okay, maybe I should send a text message. Maybe I should write a letter. Maybe I should drop a seed in a cousin that's going to see them next week before I see them so that they know that I'm a different person. I'm trying to fix the situation and make it better because I'm not trusting that God is going to fix it. And so I'm sending people and messengers and all these things ahead of time. And this is exactly what Jacob does. He sends not only his servants, but he sends 200 female goats, 20 male goats, and 200 just rams. He's like sending all of these things because he's like, look, let me butter him up. And maybe he just takes this gift and he won't beat me up too bad because he's gotten this great gift to add to his own wealth. And so God is behind the scenes and working even in this crazy, fearful situation on Jacob's behalf. As the family stops to rest and await what Esau's response is going to be to Jacob, Jacob has a fight that he will never forget. So in Genesis 32, it continues in verse 24. It says this: so Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then he said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called this place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." And so think about this. Jacob doesn't remember all of the details of his fight with Esau. 20 years have passed. He doesn't remember all of the details, who was right, who was wrong. Did I really swindle him, or did I really have a fair deal? He doesn't remember all of the details of this fight. But Jacob will never forget this fight. He's wrestling with the Lord, and he says, "I won't let you go until you bless me." And at this time, Jacob's name is now Israel. Jacob was concerned with how Esau would receive him, but the real fight was with God. And so we need to think about this. Jacob was so concerned about Esau. He was so concerned about losing everything to Esau. But what Jacob didn't recognize is that the real fight was with God. The real fight was with the call that God had placed on Jacob's life. The real fight was believing in God's promises. The real fight was living a life dedicated to God. So like Jacob, we become overly consumed with the people who are making our life difficult. The people who have wronged us, the people who have misunderstood us, the people who accuse us, the people who don't want to hear us out. When the true fight is believing that God will keep his promises. I think about my own situation or the scenario or the fight that I have in my mind about how I tried my best, and every step I took, I felt like it made things worse. I tried to fix it. I even prayed like, "Lord, just fix the situation or make it go away." And I was forgetting that God was even using this scenario to refine me, refine my faith, and prepare me for the next season and task that he had for me. And this was true to Jacob, that God was even using this scenario with Esau to prepare him for what was next and prepare him for his new name, which is Israel. And so sometimes when we're in this fight and when we're in these situations, we forget that God promises to work all things out for the good of those who love him. When we're in these fights and when we're in these scenarios, sometimes we forget that God promises to provide for us and to protect us. When we're in these scenarios, sometimes we forget that God promises to never leave us or forsake us. And when we're in these scenarios, sometimes we forget that whatever we give up for the sake of Christ, that God promises that he will return it 100-fold. So even when we don't want to lay down our pride and we don't want to be humble, he says, whatever you give up for my sake, I will return to you 100-fold. And sometimes we forget this because we're so concerned about the person or the scenario. So some of us look at the dysfunction in our family, the broken relationships, and our past as if the fight is really against that, as if the fight is really against the family dysfunction, as if the fight is really against the exes and the broken relationships, when the fight is really, Lord, what is it that you're doing in my life? The fight isn't against the pain. The fight isn't against the bad habits. The fight is, do we believe? The real fight is standing in the truth that God will and is using the heartbreak and the brokenness to refine us for the next season. God is using it to refine us. Like, some of us don't recognize that even the family dysfunction, the lies that we believe, the brokenness, and even our mistake is a part of God's divine and predestined plan for you to serve in that area, for you to be called to that area, for you to prevent others to even make the same mistakes that you have. A lot of our brokenness is connected to our call. Jacob is literally leaving that wrestling limping, not actually recognizing that his name was changed from Jacob to Israel and that his 12 sons represent the 12 tribes of Israel. Some of us are limping out of these fights and not recognizing that that limp is a reminder of what God is calling us to. And so Jacob wrestled with God and was given a new name, Israel, which means God prevails. God overcomes. God perseveres. And so the promise of Abraham, the promise of Jacob, is that all of the nations will be blessed through his seed, will be blessed through his family. The fear of Esau led Jacob to recall the promises of God. In that fear, he fell on his face and said, Lord, do you remember what you promised me? In the midst of that fear, he fell on his face and said, Lord, you said you would protect me. The focus was no longer on Esau, but it was on the promises of God. What are the relationships or situations in our lives that are taking up all of our time and attention? And it causes fear. It causes frustration. It causes anger. It even causes us to act outside of Christian character when we should be remembering what God has said to us. In the scenario that I'm thinking through in my mind, I remember this. I was so focused on my response, so focused on covering my end of the story, that I was acting outside of Christian character to defend myself when I should have been drawn closer to Jesus and asking him, what are you doing in this scenario? What are you doing in this season that's going to prepare me for the next season or prepare me for my call? With someone who was close to me and has hurt me plan to do for evil, Lord, you are using it for good and you're using it to save others. So I want us to think about these situations or these relationships that are taking our attention away from what is God actually doing in this season. That's taking our gratitude away from how God's been providing for us despite this brokenness or despite the situation. And I want us to confess that to the Lord and say, Lord, I am sorry that, like Jacob, I'm focusing on Esau and I should be focusing on you. Lord, I apologize that I'm focusing on losing it all when you've promised me that that every family and nation will be blessed through me. I apologize that I'm focusing on this when you've protected me and you've brought me so far. I'm sorry that I forgot how far you've brought me because I'm only focusing on this one negative thing in my season right now. When that negative thing in your season is building and refining you to be the person, the Christian, the son, the daughter, the minister that you need to be in this next season. The fear led Jacob to God. Let this fear lead you back to God. Instead of just saying, you know what, I'm not going to come back. I'm just going to withdraw. I'm not going to read my Bible. I'm not going to pray. Have it lead you back to the promises of God. We need to recall the promises that he's made on our lives and claim it, and not allow the fear to suffocate and smother it out.